Like to rope into the conversation Professor Loren Landau, a coordinator of the Wits-Oxford Mobility Governance Lab, to also weigh in on the protest action and of course, the heightened anti-foreigner sentiment in the country of late. Professor, very good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, there are a number of factors that speak to the reasons behind the heightened anti-foreigner sentiment in the country of late. As we reflect on what's happening at the moment in Diepsloot, the community members are saying enough is enough. They're laying the blame on the high rates of crime on undocumented foreign nationals. Let's talk about some of the contributing factors to this sort of tone that we're hearing of late.
So thank you for covering this, and it is deeply worrying to hear the kind of frustration that people have. And I think this is really at the root of what we're seeing across the country, is that people have waited 10 years, 15 years, 20 years to live in a place that is secure, where they can build a future, where their children can be in the street safely. Diepsloot went 15 years without a police station. So the fact that it is insecure, the fact that there are groups in the community who are taking advantage of that lawlessness is not surprising. The real challenge now is that the solution to this problem is not necessarily about good policing, the rule of law. It is about evicting foreigners who are seen as somehow the root of this crime, the root of the problems, the root of the insecurity. And that's an issue of political framing. That's an issue of people coming in, having not worked in the communities, having not helped those communities for 15 or 20 years, and offering quick solutions. We're going to get rid of the foreigners and things will be better. Obviously, what's needed here, and what you can hear in that frustration, is a presence of the police, a presence that can help make people safe, not a quick solution of getting foreigners out.
You have been writing quite extensively about the rising vigilantism and perhaps South Africa now in a position where it may be reaping the fruits of misrule. Let's talk to misrule and perhaps what you believe would encompass the elements of misrule as we assess the situation.
I think what we see in Diepsloot is an excellent example of this, but it's happened all over, not just in Gauteng, KZN, parts of the Western Cape, Eastern Cape, but it's areas where you have either new townships like Diepsloot, which has only been there about 20 years, or even new sections or contested sections of other townships where the government has not gone in. We don't see the police, we don't see the parties. Instead, they've allowed those areas to be ruled by community associations, sometimes coming out of the hostel, sometimes sort of formed locally. Sometimes these are excellent organizations who provide services, provide security, but they often work as protection rackets, rooted in violence, extracting taxes, deciding who can live in these areas. And the government has sort of relied on them to keep order and to deliver votes. The problem now is the frustrations of those communities are very, very strong, as we've been hearing, and the government no longer has the resources to kind of keep them in line. And with the kind of conflicts we're seeing within the ruling party, the dip below 50%, many different actors are seeking to mobilize these groups, to mobilize their supports to gain political power. And part of the vigilantism is rooted in that.
You've also argued that poverty in its own element is not enough to, the vigilante sentiment is not always due to the extent of poverty, especially now as we take stock of what the country is facing. High unemployment, of course, COVID-19 exacerbating the situation, a lot of young people looking for jobs and feeling threatened by foreigners who are in the country.
Yes, obviously poverty and inequality are extraordinary issues. They're extraordinary issues that face many South Africans, perhaps the majority of South Africans at this point. But the issue is that not everyone is jumping in to the vigilantism, not everyone is jumping into the anti-foreigner violence. What we see is where the violence emerges, where these sort of places like Diepsloot, other places in Mamelodi, in Jeffsville, in Pretoria, and elsewhere in the country, are areas where there's contested local leadership, where you see this kind of conflict, which mobilizes people's very real concerns, very real sentiments. It frames foreigners as the problem, and then it uses this kind of sentiment for political gain. to try to gain legitimacy, to try to gain resources, to try to gain power. And that's what we're seeing across the country. So yes, anti-immigrant sentiments are strong almost everywhere and among all groups, whether rich or poor, black or white. Insecurity over the economic future is widespread. But the violence is happening in particular places, and that draws attention to this political element of it, which is often overlooked.
When we look at immigrant numbers, we know that they're not higher than they've been for at least a decade. So what then is the focal point here when it comes to the rules at play and what government officials should be saying and doing to ensure that, that residents feel that they can trust the government? I mean, the residents of Diepsloot are saying that they have no faith in the police. They're saying that their cries are not heard, and now it forces them to take the law into their own hands.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two issues there. One is the question of immigration, and clearly the immigration system is not credible. We've known for years about corruption in the Department of Home Affairs. South African officials have not been really open and honest about developing a pragmatic immigration policy. Instead, what you see is these sort of ad hoc concerns. And so people get the sense that the country's borders, the country is out of control. Of course, immigration is an issue. It's a complicated issue, but the numbers are not rising. The reason we have unemployment in South Africa is almost entirely not because of foreigners. But I think the bigger issue that you put your finger on is the lack of faith in government to restore order, to restore things. And this gives people the sense that they need to take this into their own hands. And whether it turns on foreigners, as it seems to be doing in many places now, or turns on other South Africans who are seen as undesirable in their community, this is when we need to all be worried. Because when that authority to control who comes into the community, who works in the community, who accesses services, schools, hospitals, etc., is not done by law, is not done by the Constitution, but is done by some group that is interested in some subsection of the community, then I think we're all at risk.
Very well. Let's leave it there for now. Thank you for your time. Thanks for weighing in on this discussion. Professor Loren Landau, co-director of the Wits-Oxford Mobility Governance Lab.